Hey, what's up, guys? How y'all doing? Azzy, and we are
Hey,
with Mr. Jason Sosa. What's going on, fellas and lady?
hey, lady.
Lady and sir.
Yeah,
Doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, it's a
good to
pleasure.
have you.
So, we have Mr. Jason Sosa here, and we are going to have just a friendly conversation just about some of the emerging things in blockchains, Jason's background. So, I guess how you want to open this up, Asmaret?
Okay, so I'll start first. I just want to preface it and say as well, we have a privilege of having someone who is a trailblazer. We are focusing on the beautiful, amazing, talented men and women of color leading the blockchain revolution. And we're starting, we have a series of interviews that we will be taking part with. And this is going to be absolutely incredible. So thank you for joining us. And thank you very much for joining us as well, Jason. So can you share with us the story of how you decided to pursue this career path? Like, let us know, give us a background to who you are, what you've done, what lessons can others learn from your story?
Absolutely. So I have a pretty humble beginning. So I grew up, the son of a restaurant owner, migrant worker. I didn't have a lot of, expectations to go to college or Stanford or any of the things that are typical of people that enter in tech. And so it started out just by doing a lot of crappy work, going to a lot of jobs that you find that you really don't enjoy. And then you start seeing the contrast of what's out there in the world. And over a period of time, what you end up doing is you're realizing I have to better myself. I have to equip myself with the skills and the tools and the expertise that I need to go compete in the world. If I have ambitions or expectations of things I wanted to accomplish, and you get to live once, right? So I think it was that sense of urgency, that sense of passion that really led me to do that. So I was, right out, I didn't even actually finish high school. When I at high school, went to a factory, put metal in a machine, stepped on a pedal every day, completely bored out of my mind. And after that 10-hour shift, would go home and learn code and taught myself, some of the basic skills. And so part of that was, how do I take, this resource of code and computers and websites at the time, because it was, 2002. How do I take this and make something with it? And so ended up going to a number of people, offering to do work for free, trying to get out of the factory job and just, get some initial traction. So went up, talked to a few people, and before I knew it, ended up getting some projects. And it was one of those things you kind of take one step in front of the other. It's like, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And it was probably good. You don't really know what you don't know. And I think that's really the advantage of when you're young and you want to take some chances. So ended up doing some really interesting things. And around 2008, the economy totally tanked. And I'm originally from Michigan. So my family and I, we talked about it and we said, let's go to Boulder, Colorado. And so I ended up reaching out to David Cohen, Brad Feld, a number of other pretty prominent people in the space. And they said, hey, we're doing Startup Week. You should come check out what's going on in Colorado. So I would go to, I went to Techstars, met with the different people, and over a period of time, they kind of helped me understand, what this game is, how to really, compete in this space and what's required. And got into Techstars in New York City, built a computer vision company, really just out of starting things in my garage, tinkering with cameras, tinkering with, infrared light, looking up things on forums, open source projects, and ended up, getting a lot of attention around it. And so it was part of a Bloomberg reality TV show, raised venture funding, and then later on went to sell the company in about 2015. And then we've worked on, venture funds, have done a bunch of different fun stuff on emerging tech. So it's been quite an experience, I think, to come from, pretty humble beginnings, pretty unconventional background. I didn't, go to a traditional college. I didn't have the formal schooling, but to work on some of the projects from Internet of Things to 3D body scanning, worked on VR headsets. So it's really been an interesting ride.
That's exactly, you know what, me and Yusuf were speak in regards to when we were looking at some of your background, and it was absolutely relatable. That's one thing I that struck me. I'm sure you speak on it, A King, but certainly, you know, for me, leaving the 9 to 5, I always knew the 9 to 5 would not be I'm not knocking 9 to 5, but I knew that was not my future path, and I've tried like so many different aspects. But A King, what you were
So
saying
listen,
earlier.
they gave us like this long list of kind of corny questions to ask you. So I'm gonna go a little off because
Let's go off script.
I'm reading some of this stuff. I'm like, man, I can't do this. This is already getting dry. So listen, I'm gonna just talk to you.
Let's
So
do it.
what motivates you? What drives you? What gets you up in the morning to kind of push further, to kind of develop yourself? Who do you look at up to? Who are your mentors? Like where do you what school? I like to ask people because people talk a lot of stuff and everybody has an opinion. And I challenge people. I say, where's your school of thought? Like, where does that come from? Like, are you just making things up because it feels good and it sounds good? It confirms your natural biases? So, like, that's my question to you is like, what is your motivation? What drives you? What kind of got you over to the next hump? And then who are the people you kind of look up to and where your school of thought comes from?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think philosophy is so important. I mean, it's the lens by which we view everything, and it colors how we view the world, how we view ourselves. And I tend to take the perspective of life as a Photoshop setting. So if you ever mess with any kind of application, you have this little slider bar, you know, and I'm just a curious individual. And so I tend to say, well, what is it going to do if I go to the extreme? So I'll go to this way, and then I'll go all the way to the other way. And then over time of, you know, banging your head on a wall, you eventually find that nice middle ground. And so I've always been really curious to see what happens if I, you know, kind of push the edge. You know, I like to dance on that edge of that fringe of, you know, chaos and order. And it's really interesting because the people you meet there are more interesting. You know, they tend to not be so enamored with the status quo. I felt very, I think like most people that are, you know, that come from humble beginnings, maybe I had a chip on my shoulder about how, you know, things were structured, how the world was set up, about how, about my educational expectations of what I was supposed to achieve. And then trying to, you know, balance that with what I felt inside. Like I had this, someone once told me I have a dragon egg inside of me, and I'm trying to like give birth to this, you know, idea, this thing. And so that's really, you know, I think it's just kind of something I was born with. I don't know if there's a way to, you know, say I picked it up anywhere, but probably some of the more influential ways of thinking came from working in the factory. I mean, my break time, I grabbed this book called, you know, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you know, pretty basic stuff. I think inspired a lot of people, but it helped me understand the perspective of life, that there are other paths beyond the traditional way. It gave me a framework, a way of thinking. And what I see now today is there's really only two main options for knowledge workers. You can either work for the man, you know, you work in a soul-sucking corporate job where 70% of people are disengaged on a day-to-day basis, or you can work for yourself. And then that problem is now you have a feast and famine income cycle, and you have to wear all the hats. And so that idea kind of crept in my head, and I couldn't escape that. So whether I'm working in a venture fund, I'm working with a startup as I'm an advisor, or I'm building my own thing, there are a lot of different trade-offs. And what I wanted to do was just look through the two main things. One are the aspects of humans and the messiness of how people work together. And the other aspect is economics, the alignment of self-interest. And so that's where I've spent most of my time is over the last year and a half, especially thinking through blockchain and some of the things that it could unlock, which was some of these new business models. And so that's where I think I've been most influenced. And then I think lastly was just going through like a Tony Robbins event. I went through this thing, got to walk on the coals, you know, like the fire walk.
Firewalk.
You know, like it's a metaphor. Like, you know, it's not necessarily, you know, magical or anything. It's just, you know, you're breaking through limiting beliefs. And that was one of the moments when I think I gave myself permission to be unreasonable, to be crazy, because, you know, there's that little voice in the back of my head that says, you know, you're 25, you can make mistakes, go do it. And I'm glad I listened to that voice, because I mean, I could still be in a factory today. So I mean, it's not that there's anything inherently wrong with that, but for me, it was something I had to break through. You know, that built-in bias of this is just the way things are. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, it definitely does. And just so we could do you justice, Jason. So how would you, like, what are you most proud of, or what would you say what your biggest accomplishment is, the most significant? So if somebody's listening to this, like, why are we talking to this Jason guy? So what would you say to that person as to why you're important and why you matter?
Well, that's a great question. If you ask that question from a variety of different, like we talk about these, filters, the lenses by which we view things. If you look at it from the perspective of, okay, financial accomplishment, who did you raise money from? I was part of Techstars. I worked with venture funds. I've been sold through an investment bank, and I've been into, it's just that kind of stuff. But I think the real reason you want to listen to what I have to say is because I'm fundamentally thinking about some of the challenges that are happening in the world today. And I see a lot of people talking about universal basic income. Robots are going to come take over jobs. And so I've been mostly known for ideas around transhumanism, the future of work. And that's where I spend most of my time and energy these days, is really thinking through how do we solve this challenge of work that's becoming automatable. And more these tools, these technologies become commodities. The sophistication ladder is becoming, work is becoming more and more sophisticated. So the economic rungs of the ladder are being sawed from the bottom. You have people that are going to be Walmart checkout, people that scan barcodes all day, and those jobs are going to go away. And I think we're at a stage now where society's changing so fast. You can see the corrosion on institutions almost, right? You can see that people are starting to think, wow, the way that things were set up for the past aren't necessarily going to be what we need for the future. We hear this in education, we hear this in work, we hear it all over the place. But there was nothing tangible that you could hold on to, like a piece of paper or a formula that you could point to that says, here's a better way to move forward. And that really, gosh, if you ask what wakes me up at night and what makes me get up in the morning, it's something like that. I really want to see a better way, an alternative, a third alternative to working for the man or working for yourself. And this idea of building it as a consortium or a co-op, building an operating system as a decentralized autonomous organization, all these ideas that have been out for that are pretty new, I think, over the last couple of years, opens the door to a completely new way of thinking that's built for the digital age and isn't just relegated to the biases of capitalism, socialism as an argument, because those have been done, they've been had. We have to have completely new ways of thinking, and that's what I've been out evangelizing about. So I think that's probably one of the more interesting things I talk about these days, is the transition of us as a species, where we're headed next. Because our grandparents didn't even know about germs. They were pretty much thinking that spirits would come into us. And just all of the things that have really transpired over the last 100, 200 years. We're at the front row seat of where things are going next.
And just to add to that, because I was actually advising Aching in regards to universal basic income, because I believe you have in America a 2020 presidential candidate running on the manifesto of having a universal basic income of $1,000 for everyone, so it can inspire more entrepreneurship. And I really want you to speak on that, because there has been this trend and this fear of people losing their jobs due to automation. We've seen it when you go to McDonald's, when you go to self-service kiosks. It's just getting more and more prevalent. So speak to that, and in regards relating it to the projects you've been working on.
Yeah, the challenge with anything like giving people money away for free is really an issue, I think, for many, because it's more than just transactional, right? Everyone wants to kind of break this either down into money or bits. And there's people behind this, and I think that's really a fundamental driver. And people have purpose, and they have to have a reason to get up in the morning, and they have to have some sort of intrinsic meaning in their life. And I think that's far more valuable than having an external force tell you when to get up, what to do, how long to do it, in this kind of paternal way. Like, Mom, Dad, can I go to work today, or can I, where do I sit today? How long do I work at this thing? And it's a need, I think, for responsibility. It's a need for people to take ownership and have some sort of means to provide self-sustainable, income for themselves. Money is changing, so it's really one of those things when we look at the way we want to solve problems for the future. We keep looking back in these retro biases of the past of what was going to accomplish the things for an industrial era. But we have a hard time really anticipating some of the changes that are happening, because things are moving so quickly. So when you think about like $1,000, what you could see happen is this bifurcation of a society, because now you have people that have a stable means of income, but what you then have is now a group of marketers that are going to change their messaging. Then you have like the elites, and you kind of have everybody else. So it really just puts a Band-Aid on the problem. What we really have to solve is the fundamental issue of distribution of resources in general. And that's one of the things that I've been, taking a lot of time and talking to a lot of people, just trying to solve, is rather than having a model that's hierarchy, right? That you have capital that's pulled up from the top, where you have a seed round, a seed A, you have a B round, a C round, where you're making money on the spread. It's all of the games that are being played in venture capital and everything to really maximize profits. And it's all about growth. And there seems to be missing something, which is just the fundamental well-being of human beings. And now we kind of see that reflected in our world today, or even just in the news today. Like we embrace the Saudis because it's economically in our best interest to do so. And so we kind of, we say in not so many words, or perhaps in many words, that that's more important than our principles and our values. And I think we're finally coming to a point in our generation where we're saying, okay, enough of this. We are really trying to figure out, how do we move forward? Where the hell are we all running to? We're building technology for technology's sake. We're running 1,000 miles an hour. We get up in the morning, we get our coffee, we get to work, and I sit at my desk, and what am I doing here? So maybe this is just like an existential crisis, because I'm 38 and I'm starting to think about all this stuff, but I think a lot of other people are too. And the timing is right for a brand new system, something that we think of that isn't tied to the perhaps pains or the lessons of the past from a socialist perspective. That's always something that comes up, but really thinking about it from today's more global world in a digital space. How do we use the tools at our disposal to experiment? And that's what I think is really needed today, is something beyond universal basic income, something where people can actually get a proof of value for their contributions. And in Brazil, there's some really interesting things that are happening where people are able to earn currency for good they do, and they can spend it in the community. So homeless people, for example, can use those resources and have an access to an economy that they previously wouldn't have had. So things like that, we're starting to see new ways of thinking about value, about contribution, about distribution of resources, and that's it's been a long time coming, but I think we're finally at the early stages of it. It's as some have said, it's the AOL CDs being sent out. We're at that stage of blockchain, so it'll be a few years.
So the last few days in the crypto world, prices have definitely changed quite a bit. So with the most recent slumps that we've been seeing in Bitcoin and cryptos almost across the board, has that changed your opinions or feelings towards cryptocurrency or blockchain technology? Or do you kind of see that just as a natural cycle progression?
It's really funny. Blockchain really follows this path of every month is like a year. And what we've really gotten to at this stage is this trough of disillusionment. So where there was all this hype because of the speculative nature of some of the currencies, you saw ICOs get really popular for a period of time. And everybody came out of the woodwork, and I think it was a necessary correction, because it really cleaned out a lot of the speculators that are there. There's a lot of scams going on. There's still a lot of pay to play, things that are just basically not good for the industry. And if blockchain is to get mainstream adoption, we have to have, I think, a better system and a better way of operating. And I think that there's still some room for improvement. Now, cryptocurrency prices for like Ethereum, it totally killed crowdfunding. I think that was one of the other aspects too. And there's so much noise in the space. How are you supposed to know if there's any, quality projects out there? And so even if the reviewers are paid, the speeches are paid, some even podcasts are paid. So there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on, and it makes it hard to really determine what's good and what's not. So we're finally getting past the point of, I have this white paper and I have this idea. The next step is going to be, show me something, show me some tech, show me some added value, show me the customers. What's your business model? How is this not an arcade token that you just put into a machine? Or are you just, decentralizing a centralized solution? How is it different? And I think that's one of the challenges people are really trying to figure out. How do I make new business models? And we're still in the early stages. So it may take another decade.
What's your favorite altcoin right now?
Oh, I actually haven't followed the altcoins too closely. Um, Gosh, that's a great question. Um, I think it's still too early going. I really I don't know if there's really I think there's really kind of the two main ones. I mean, you have Ethereum and Bitcoin, but yeah, as far as I'm going to take a pass on the altcoin question, it's kind
Yeah,
of
I'm a
minefield.
Bitcoin maximalist. I think that alts, a lot of them will go away, but I think Bitcoin is going to definitely be here to stay. So, you mentioned that you had humble beginnings. I was kind of interested as far as what that actually meant.
Yeah. So I mean, so I grew up in West Michigan, a fairly conservative town. Not a lot of expectations that I would do much other than be like an HVAC, repairman or work in a factory. So in the 1980s, there was this expectation of, you go to school, you get a good job, you do your thing, and then you're successful. And because I didn't follow that path, I went to school. My grade point average was 0.98, and I had to escape a lot of security guards to get my GPA that low. But I was just so bored. I mean, my brain was going. I wanted to learn stuff, and I was very much driven by purpose. So when they would ask questions, like if Susie's going on a train and from this destination to that, I wouldn't care. I'm like, well, why is she on the train? Why does she have to get there? And so I was one of those kids, and I think the questions really helped serve me later on and helped me to think more laterally about problems and have a vested emotional interest, which gave me the resiliency to dig in. But I think the traditional path for school was very much like, here's knowledge, it's, spoon feed it to you. So I kind of rejected a lot of that. And because of that, I didn't have an alternate path. And my dad was an entrepreneur, and he had a restaurant, he had real estate businesses, and he grew up dyslexic, and so he couldn't read. And so he was it was kind of one of those challenging things. We had to really kind of figure out stuff on our own. And he gave me the insight to know that during one of the times there was a rainstorm, and there's a bunch of people out there caught in the rain. He gave me a bag of garbage bags and said, "Hey son, go out there and sell garbage bags for $1." And just stuff like that, putting me in the circumstance to learn about being an entrepreneur, that value isn't something you have to be certified in. You don't need an accreditation to have an opinion or to really add value to other people's lives. And so that's when I kind of realized that there's a way to kind of bypass the rules. And I think that in part is why blockchain is so appealing for so many, is that it kind of tears down the barrier and the structures that are in place. You can bypass and kind of democratize a lot of what has been controlled before. Yeah, so I think my background, I didn't go to college. I didn't have a expectation that I was going to go to college. I was really kind of expected to be a laborer, and it was really kind of breaking through that, working at factories, doing odd end jobs, and knocking on as many doors as I possibly could to try to elevate myself and have upward mobility.
So in relation to the blockchain space, I'm gonna try to throw a couple of these questions in here so we can satisfy the powers that be. What do you think? And this is probably the only question I'm gonna ask. Who made this list? As Brett, who made this list? Were you part of that committee that came up with this list? What would you say? I mean, I kind of feel
not
like
quite, but go ahead.
Touched on some of these things, but if not all these things, just with natural conversation. So, but I will ask you this: what do you think is what excites you the most about blockchain technology, and what worries you the most about blockchain technology? I will ask you.
Oh man. Well, I think what I'm most concerned is that people. Well, I think this will probably happen inevitably. Is that you're going to have power brokers that want to control this type of system. So it's a way to keep a ledger of various activities across geographically dispersed areas. Okay, so that's basically what the technology allows. And so you have banks that are forming consortiums, and they're going to have their own private currencies, and you'll see countries that are starting to do that. I think it's just an inevitability. And what we're waiting for now is people's, excuse me, it's an inevitability, and you're seeing people's mindsets begin to change. And I think that's what we're waiting for. It's more of a cultural shift that we have to have. And maybe perhaps it's a dollar collapse. that we have to have, and there's not really any kind of stable fiat to go to, because it's not gold backed, it's debt backed. And so once that craters, where do people go? Are they going to go to the euro? Are they going to get gold? And if they're, of course, assuming we still have a digital infrastructure and not a nuclear war or something, that we're going to need some sort of mechanism. So I think that it's going to take some time. And I think that there's a lot of optimistic people that are seeing, Bitcoin going to $1 million in the next few months or by the end of the year or whatever. But this is something that's going to be a long time in the making. And I think the people that are involved now can really help shape that discussion. And I think people of color definitely need to be a part of that discussion.
I'm interested about this, which to me is kind of counterintuitive, is that if you're a crypto enthusiast, why does the value of crypto against the USD matter? Like, why, if we, as long as we continue to push that conversation forward, aren't we in essence hindering ourselves, disabling our mission if we're trying to make one BTC equal one BTC as a measure of an account? So why do we put so much emphasis on the US? I mean, I have some speculation on why, obviously, but the point that I'm trying to get to is that when we boil down to it, it appears, and I want your opinion on it, it appears that we really don't care about crypto. We just want a lot of USD. And so that's one thing. There's an altcoin called Ripple. And the thing about Ripple that's different is that it aligns itself with institutional players like big banks, et cetera. So Ripple is the antithesis of a pure crypto, decentralized blockchain lover. Like, everything you love about cryptocurrency, Ripple should rub you the wrong way, because Ripple is big banks, Ripple is centralized, et cetera, et cetera. But Ripple's doing extremely well compared to these other altcoins right now in the market. So what we're learning is that people actually want to be with the big banks. We don't want to beat them. We want to join the party. So my question, when we put our thumb on the pulse, is what do we really want out of this? Do we just want a lot of USD and to be with the movers and shakers? Or do you see us actually moving into a tokenized society, and that's something that we want as a people?
Yeah, it's a legacy problem, because you can't move forward with a digital economy while you're still operating in a USD world. You have to pay for rent and pay bills and buy Starbucks and all that stuff. And so while there's a lot of really interesting things going on, there needs to be a bridge between this world of dead trees and paper contracts and SOWs and all the stuff that comes in on the business side and banks and all that kind of thing, into what's happening with smart contracts and DAOs and all the stuff that's going to come down the road later. So without that, I think without some sort of like a transitionary process, or make a way to kind of bring the old world into the new world and show the benefits of it, it'll be harder to get mainstream adoption, I think, in general, because really it's going to begin in business. They're going to have the greatest need, and that's going to pull everything else forward. So at least that's what I see, is just the legacy component of why it's necessary. I don't think it's so much USD. I think it's the fungibility of the token and the liquidity that it provides. So if you can have as many altcoins as you want, but at some point you have to pay your bills, and so that's where, and until landlords begin accepting Ripple or Ether or something else.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead, Ezzy.
Perfect. Sorry, I was having tech issue on the laptop. Okay, so here's the thing, as you guys, as we all know, there's not a lot of people of color in the tech sector. So can you share 3 things that you would advise to other kings and queens of color in the tech space how to thrive?
So let me jump in. I seen that question on the list, and it was a stupid question to me. Whoever did this question, because you're not a person of color, so it puts you in a weird space, puts us in a weird space, so we're all in a weird space now. I was like, why have a person, a non-African American? Like, I don't want to ask you a question and position you to offer us solutions to our problems, because 1, those solutions need to come from people that look like us, and 2, if we make this a pattern of reaching out to people that don't look like us to give us a solution to our unique problems, we're going to end up in historically worse conditions. So it was probably I got some ideas who might have came up with this question. But since she's asked, let's say that if you were an African American and you're in blockchain technology and you're going through this space, to the best of your knowledge, like what is something that you think would be unique to the Black Jason?
Oh man. Oh man. I think one of the things is just knowing that other people are out there doing it, and that you're not kind of. I think it's one of those things. Growing up, I didn't have a whole lot of role models. I mean, I had Zorro and Ricky Ricardo and maybe George Lopez. On the on the Hispanic side.
Well, you're Hispanic, so what are you exactly? Are you like Dominican or?
Actually, my ancestry DNA says I'm 60% European Spanish, and then the remainder being native Mesoamerican, so Mexican. Okay. Awesome. So that's my ancestry. But it's gosh, there really isn't a whole lot of people in with my with a Hispanic background that are in tech. I mean, you just don't find them a lot. I'm not sure if it's because they're just not around that, but I found that technology was a tool for me to learn, and because I was so curious, it really at the time, I think it just hit it perfectly, the timing of it, where I could kind of dive in and I could take these courses from these amazing people that I didn't have to actually meet, and it provided a way to connect people all over the world. So it really helped democratize, I think, a lot of the knowledge that was previously kind of cooped up in Stanford and all these other places that I wouldn't have been able to get access to. So I think that it's really connecting to other people. Don't be afraid just to reach out. I'll answer the question in my Black Jason way. So don't be afraid to reach out to people. I mean, a lot of times, like the best opportunities always come through people, and just let them know. And you're going to make mistakes. You're going to fuck up. You're going to do things that you wish you wouldn't have done. But it's ultimately having that superpower of resilience and persistence, and that really does pay off a lot. And so I think people of color have a lot of experience, I think, with that type of trait. You're used to kind of pushing through and be a lot easier to quit. And I think that we need to have other people that we can point to and say, that's somebody I need to reach out to. He can help me, or she can help me figure out the path to be who I want to be.
Now, you mentioned earlier on that you were a firewalker. You did the Anthony Robbins experience, excuse me. And so on that, what is your favorite? Do you have a favorite life lesson quote? Is there a story you can share with us how that's worked out in your life? What are the principles you stand by?
Well, there's quite a few, but I think the one that is most relevant, especially the one that I got from that conference, was that this isn't necessarily about achieving a goal. And I think people that are starting businesses, or if you're getting into tech because you want to get rich, I mean, I think statistically you can look at that information and make your stomach churn. You really have to love what you do, and so it's not necessarily coming from a sense of doing that you have, but it really comes from your being that you do, and not of your doing you have. So fall in love with the being part of it. It's not so much the goal, it's who you become through the process. So I think that's probably one of my favorite quotes from Tony Robbins. And it's something that I've really embraced, is the being part of it. So you can, read all the books about how Elon Musk does this and that, and how Steve Jobs has his breakfast, and all those things are great, but they're not really going to help you as much. And it's really finding what inside of you is unique, because it's your unique perspective that you add to the world, and especially in a space of people of color, we need that. In the work I was doing before with face detection, face recognition software, it's just amazing. There's all kinds of bias, I think, that's built into tools, built into tech, and it needs for varied experiences of people to really help contribute to that, because it affects everybody.
Sweet. So I would imagine you're on social media, right, Jason?
Absolutely. Yeah.
How will we follow you?
Yeah.
Look you up right now. Jason Soza, right?
That's right. There's a famous boxer. So he kind of looks like me. I'm not a boxer. He's a guy named Jason Soza as well, but I'm Jason J. Soza. And you can follow me on Twitter, Jason_Soza. I'm on, you can look us up on Facebook, on Telegram at blackboxfoundation.org.
Perfect.
Black Box Foundation on Facebook?
Online on Facebook. You can go on our website, and then we're all linked on there. So blackboxfoundation.org.
Got you. So we're definitely going to link in, plug in, get connected with Jason so we can follow your journey and all the information and tools that you have out. So that's really interesting. Asmar, did you have any other questions or any? I know you have that list.
Well, sorry guys, I was having technical issues, so I'm not sure if I missed the part where you were talking about your projects. Have I missed that part or not?
Oh, yes.
Can you tell us more about your projects themselves?
Yeah, absolutely.
The most interesting project you're working on.
Well, I think that was, as I mentioned earlier, we got really kind of dismayed. You see these experiments and projects around, universal basic income, and we thought it was really lacking. And so what we wanted to do was something that was pretty unique. We wanted to build a talent sharing network. So you have Airbnb, you have Uber for sharing, rides and apartments and houses and such. But what about sharing employees? How do we reduce the bench cost and the utilization? So if you think of talent balancing, the data scientist usually sucks at sales and the sales guy usually sucks at data science. How do we help them go from 10% of their time being billable to more? And how do we do that as a distributed collective of people, as independent owners? Because that way our motivation is aligned together. How do we align our human self-interest so that you are a partner working in your own business and we just happen to work together? And somebody who's not great at tech can find somebody who is. And I think one of the interesting aspects of that is we see this as a transitionary process. We start as a small group. Then over time, we get additional people to be a part of it, and we move toward a decentralized autonomous organization because the infrastructure has to be built, the testing has to happen. The tech isn't quite there yet, but I think more so it's a mental model mind shift from this is how you start a company. You have a CEO, you have a CTO, you have stocks, you have preferred shares, common shares. We're really kind of upending a lot of that, and we're working with this model called steward ownership. So it's not about pulling capital out, it's about making it additive. And that helps everyone as a whole. And we want to make that as an alternative to the path of working for someone else or being isolated and working for yourself.
So my very last question would be for an 18-year-old young man looking to break into tech. Like, what would you tell him to do? Like, what would be one of the things that you've learned that would kind of fast track or fast pace his development into the industry, rather as getting an engineering job or become a developer? Like, what would be something that someone could listen to this interview and take away and say, you know what, I can do this tomorrow? Like, what would be your most actionable step? I know you mentioned like don't be afraid to reach out. Information's out there. Everyone is so accessible now. But outside of that, like what would you offer to that person?
Yeah, there is it depends on the geographic nature of where they are, because oftentimes there's a bubble, and you can be in the bubble of the Midwest, you can be a bubble of New York, you can be a bubble of San Francisco or somewhere else. So oftentimes you might not have the perspective because of just geographic constraint. That's less of a problem now than when I started. So before I didn't have the access, and everything really was concentrated in just a few cities. Reaching out is incredibly important. It's also really important to be a really good storyteller. Makes things concise. Speak at a third grade reading level. It doesn't have to be super complicated. A lot of these tech, innovations weren't made by gods, and so really understand that there are no people that did these things. They're no smarter than you are. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all just human beings. We're all just kind of making it up as we go along. I went to a Techstar incubator, and I got to meet some of the most amazing people in the world. They're just figuring it out too. They're just doing the best they can. And so we often kind of, have this idol worship in the tech space of Elon Musk knows exactly what he's going to do. And he's of course fairly brilliant. And we don't maybe cognitively think that, but I think there's that kind of feeling out there that there is a group of people, they're better than me, they're smarter than me. And I think what you can probably do is take some time to learn from people, reach out to them, and you'll be surprised, I think, how many people will be willing to, have a cup of coffee with you, share their learning, their insight. But what you can do today, just start making mistakes. To be honest with you, that's the best thing you can do. Get used to failing. Get used to the, there's all these things you can learn about how to make a perfect pitch deck and how to do such and such as a mechanic of whatever you're trying to accomplish. But there's not a lot of articles about how to deal with the intrinsic challenges, right? The doubts, the questions you have about your own self-worth. Am I enough? Will I be loved? The basic core fears that most people have. So as soon as you can face those things and you can have the courage and the bravery to look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself if this is really a path you want to go down and the trade-offs that you're willing to make, that's an important step, because being an entrepreneur is something that shouldn't be taken lightly. It's kind of in your blood, and I think that's what's probably going to propel people on this path.
Well, Jason, I know we kept you for a while, and you gave us a ton of great information, a ton of great inspiration, insight. So, I mean, we have your social media. Now, I wish I could. Jason, I wish I could find you on Facebook. I'll make you say that.
Yeah, and on my website's jasonsoza.com as well, so that might be easier.
Here you are. Oh, you have one of those pages. We can't add you because you're too important.
Yeah, I think I got maxed out on friends or something.
He has a celebrity profile.
There's also YouTube as well. YouTube, Telegram, LinkedIn, and
That's
Twitter.
Right,
yeah. Channel as well.
Black Boss.
Yep, we're all over. We have like
right.
we're like converted into like a dozen languages, and we're all over the place.
Awesome, man. I'm definitely going to follow and subscribe and definitely stay in tune. So I definitely appreciate you for doing this with us and your time. I wish Ajmer was on camera so she could too.
I can go on camera. I'm just making sure that I don't get cut off again with the problems. But we appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. And yeah, stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Jason?
No. You can reach me at jasonsoza.com or blackboxfoundation.org.
And there it is. Peace, family.
Great. Yep. Thank you guys so much.
Later.